to page 45, which is where you're going to find the 3.1 launch. Okay, at any time during this video, if I am going too fast or writing too fast, then what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and pause the video so that you can catch up. But I'm going to go ahead and talk through it as quickly as I can and not wait for you. But if you need to pause, just go ahead and pause. All right, so 3.1 launch says your friend claims that x squared is the same as 2x. Tell how he could have come to that conclusion. Explain whether you agree. So this guy right here is saying that both of these two are the same. So if I would write this one out, x squared, okay, actually means that we have x times x. And if I did that with numbers, if I said that something is 3 squared, that would mean 3 times 3, and 3 times 3 would be 9. So there it is with numbers. The other one says 2x. So 2x, whoops, and I wrote 2. If I write 2x, what that really means is that you have 2 times a number. Okay, so if I look at that, that means I have, say, 2 times 3, and 2 times 3 would be 6. So those two are very different. They do not mean the same thing at all. And so what we're going to look at in topic 3 is a lot of this stuff with exponents. All right, so connecting our learning today. So our big idea here is how can you apply what you know about squares and square roots to write and solve equations of the form x squared equals p. How can you use equations in that form? So we talked about square roots a little bit in topic 1. Remember a square root, we looked at these, and we looked at square roots that were rational and square roots that were irrational. So this one right here obviously would be rational because the square root of 16 is 4. And remember that meant that it was 4 times 4, which is 4 squared. So that's what we're going to be working on today. All right, so go ahead and turn your page to the Got It. And we're going to be, this Got It is written directly in your book. It's the first one on your page. And we're going to learn how to solve this. Okay, so this is pretty easy. This is saying blank times itself is 625. So the way that we're going to solve this is just like working with an equation, like we did in topic 2. So we have two sides to this equation, and we're going to undo it. So the opposite of a squared is a square root. So we're going to use the square root, and we're going to square root both sides of the equation, just like we did in topic 2. If we do something to the left side, we have to do it to the right side. We're going to say, okay, what is the square root of 625? Okay, and your calculator is going to tell you that it is 25. Now, what you need to be careful of is that not only is it 25, because if I take 25 times 25, I get 625. But also, if I take negative 25 times negative 25, I also still get a positive 625, because a negative times a negative is still a positive. So when I write my answer, I can write y equals 25, put a comma and say, and negative 25, or if you want a shortcut, you can put y equals this symbol, which means the positive or negative 25. So either one of these you can write for your answer, either one. Okay? All right, so now what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and try to go ahead and do one of these, which means I want you to try it, pause the video for a second, and then come back and check your work. Okay? So you're going to do that for each one. So work it, pause it, check it, and then play again and do each one of these to make sure that you're getting them correct. Okay? All right, I'm going to go ahead and work the first one now. So again, this one, I'm going to take the square root. Oh, and remember I told you to put it right here, part 1, top box. All right, square root would be x equals the square root of 4 would be positive and negative 2. Okay? So now you can go ahead and work this one, and then pause the video now, work it, and then unpause. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and solve this one. So I'm going to take the square root of this side, the square root of this side. Oh, forgot to draw my line. So the square root of x squared is just x. and the square root of 81 is plus or minus 9. Go ahead and try letter C, and then pause the video. All right, so let's go ahead and work C now. All right, so again, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So this is x equals plus or minus 7. Okay, go ahead and try letter D, so pause. All right, now we're going to pick back up, and I'm going to, again, take the square root of both sides, so x equals plus or minus 4. Okay? All right, very good. Now we're going to move on to the next part, which is doing this with a fraction. All right, so this is the bottom box. This is the one that's on your Got It section. So we're going to work this one, and then you're going to try one on your own. All right, so right here, we're going to start with y squared equals 4/9. And I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of y squared just like I did before, and I'm going to take the square root of that whole fraction. What this really means is that I am taking the square root of 4 and I am taking the square root of 9. Okay, so I'm going to say y equals the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 9 is 3, and it's positive or negative, so I'm going to keep that plus or minus. Okay, all right, you guys are going to go down. You're going to try this one, so I want you to pause the video, try it, and then unpause and check it to see if you did it correctly. All right, so picking up where we left off. So again, I'm going to take this one, I'm going to square root both sides. I'm going to remember that this means the square root of 64 over the square root of 81. So the square root of 64 is 8. The square root of 81 is 9 equals A. And I'm going to go ahead and put the positive and negative because it can be both of them. All right. So let's look at how we're going to do this with some word problems. Notice right here I told you guys to go to the Part 3 Got It, which is the big box on page 47. I only want you to use the top half. So right now you can go ahead and put a line right smack through the middle so we can do this one, and then I can have you try one. Okay? All right, so this skill, we're going to learn how to write an equation when we're given a word problem. Okay, it says a square painting has an area of 460 square centimeters, okay, which basically just means you have a square painting like that, 460 squares inside of it. Okay, what is the length of the side of the painting to the nearest centimeter? Okay, now first of all, we're going to point out this said square. Mine doesn't quite look square. It looks a little more like a rectangle, but we're going to pretend that it's a square, which means all of its sides are equal. Okay, and it has an area of 460. So I'm going to go ahead and write that below. All right, oops, I don't know why I put degrees. 460. What is the length of one side? So this is what I'm trying to figure out, is the length of the side, which are all the same. And I need to pay attention to, it says the nearest tenth of a centimeter. So nearest tenth of a centimeter is very important. I'm going to be rounding here when I get done. Okay? All right, so to set this up, I should know that to find the area of a square, I am going to use base times height, which means I'm going to take this number times this number, and that should give me this number. And since it's a square, this number and this number have to be the same. So if I go ahead and change it to a variable, I could say this is x and this is x. And I want x times x, which if I put an x times an x, that is x squared. So x squared equals 460, which is the area. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and do the square root of each side, like I was doing a second ago. So square root of this and square root of that. I don't know the square root of 460. I should know that it's not a perfect square, and which means it's an irrational number, but I might need to grab my calculator at this point and go ahead and hit second square root and go ahead and put in, oops, I hit the wrong one. Let me try that again. Second square root, and I'm going to put in 460. Enter, and I'm going to round to the nearest tenth. And remember, this is the tenth place right here. Okay, so I have to look at this number to choose if this is going to go up or not. So remember, 4 and below, you let this number go. So my final answer is 21.4. So x equals 21.4. And you're probably saying, well, you need the plus or minus. And so you got to think about this. If this is real life, it does not make sense to have a side that's negative 21.4. That doesn't make sense. So the only answer here that's acceptable is the positive value of 21.4. So it depends on if you're talking about a real life situation versus just something that's on paper. All right, so I want you guys to take a look at this one right here. Okay, we're going to do this in the bottom big box on page 47. So we're still on the same page. This is the second half. Okay, so let's go ahead and read this one. It says a company makes small custom designed stamps that have a square image area. The image area has an area of 1,200 millimeters squared. What is the exact length of one side of the image? So this is very similar to the one that we just did. So I want you to see if you can set up an equation and then solve it. So I want you to go ahead and pause for just a second and see if you can figure it out. So pause now. All right, so now that we've unpaused, let's see how you guys did. It says the exact length of one side. So it means we don't know this side and we don't know this side, but we know they're exactly the same because it's a square. So I have an x and an x. So x times x I would write as x squared equals, we know it's 1,200. Okay, so to undo that equation, we're going to go ahead and take the square root and the square root. So, so x equals, I'm going to go to my trusty calculator here because I don't know what the square root of 1,200 is. So again, I'm going to go ahead and hit my second and then this. I'm going to type in my 1,200, and that is 34.64. And I'm going to go back and check and see what it asked me to round to. So it says, what is the exact length of one side? Okay, well, the exact length would be the square root of 1,200. Okay, and remember that that's the exact length because the square root of 1,200 is going to be an irrational number. So there's no way that I can give the exact length because the number is going to go on forever, like pi. Okay, so I could put the square root of 1,200. Now, it says, if your answer is not a perfect square, which that's us, approximate your answer to the nearest tenth of a millimeter. So here's that tenth again. So I'm going to look at my calculator, and I'm going to say, okay, here is the 4. That does not cause the 6 to go up. 4 and below, let it go. 5 and above, give it a shove. So this is going to stay the same. So my final answer for this one is 34.6, and that's my answer for part B because it's not an exact answer. We had to round, which makes it an approximate answer. All right, you guys have just concluded your lesson of 3.1. Let me know if you have any questions.